In this video, we're going to talk about how to expose Slog3 so that you ultimately get the image that you want out of whatever scene you're shooting consistently and reliably. I think people overcomplicate what log is and how to expose using a log picture profile. And all of that complication leads to think that there is a proper way to expose Slog3, and I think all of this yields more harm than good, and it creatively limits you when exposing your images, and I'm gonna explain why in a few minutes. This video is going to be divided into two sections, a technical section to understand what log is and a practical one where we discuss the best workflows to expose your images. You can just skip to the practical part, but if you want to gain a deeper understanding of log picture profiles, I highly recommend sticking around for the technical section as well. Let's first start by understanding what log really is. A log picture profile is nothing more than the camera capturing a certain amount of stops of light from a scene and storing them into a container that allows to preserve all the data the sensor captured. So a camera, any camera, even if you don't shoot RAW, will capture raw data of a scene. That raw data is then debayered, and if you choose a log picture profile, encoded into a log image that preserves the dynamic range recorded by the sensor. So a simplified way to differentiate between a log picture profile and a standard profile is that a standard picture profile is providing you with an image that is ready to be viewed on a display right away. It's basically as if you're shooting directly in Rec. 709. Essentially, the camera is performing color management for you and outputting a finished image. Each profile in slightly different ways, but that's fundamentally what's happening. While a log picture profile allows to retain more dynamic range, not because the camera operates differently when shooting log and it magically captures more stops of light, but just because, apart from the log encoding of the raw data, the camera is not applying any color management to the image, leaving effectively all the dynamic range captured by the sensor intact, assuming that the color management step will be handled by the user. Well, shooting log has two big advantages. First, it doesn't really lock you to any look chosen by the manufacturer during the color management process, which, even if it's a neutral look, it's still a look that you might or might not like. Second, since it retains the full dynamic range from the sensor, it allows greater room for error when shooting and at the same time more flexibility in post. Take a look at this. This is the same scene shot with Slog3 and A7sIII, and purposely overexposed 4 stops for this demonstration. Since the 4 stops of overexposure are still within the sensor's dynamic range and nothing is clipped in the Slog3 image, I can bring it back to a more normal range without any issue. But if you try to do the same thing with the A7sIII image, since the color management has already taken place in camera and because of the increasing contrast some of the values are clipped, there's no way to bring back the image to a more suitable exposure level. The data is simply lost and not recoverable. So now, with that out of the way and with the understanding that a log picture profile isn't a magical thing but just the camera not doing some type of color management for you, let's get practical and see how to expose a log profile. I believe that all the difficulties regarding exposing log come from not having a proper preview of how your final image is going to look like. Since log looks flat and desaturated, because of that, it's hard to understand what's really happening with your image. So, in order to compensate for that, one of the most common approaches is to use guidelines that tell us where to place certain elements of our scene. For example, skin tones. You probably heard people saying that to properly expose skin tones, they should fall between a certain IRE range. Even Sony suggests to have them placed between 48 and 52 IREs when shooting Slog3, but should they? Should they really always fall between that range? Are skin tones sitting in that range here, and here, and here? Well, the answer is no, they're not. But does this mean that these images are not properly exposed? hold on for a second and let's stick to this very common approach for a minute and see where it leads us and why I think it does more harm than good. Here I have a very simple shot, a practical augmented by an Amaran F21C out of frame. In this first scenario, I'm previewing a flat log image, and as many suggest, I'm gonna use zebras to place my skin tones at around 50 IREs. So I'm gonna increase the brightness of the key until the skin tones hit 50 IREs. At the moment, I'm not aware of many things. I don't know exactly what's the brightness relationship between the practical and the key. I don't exactly know how the key is wrapping around the face of the subject. The only thing I know that I'm sure of is that the skin tones are hitting 50 IREs. And because of that, I should be golden. So then I take that image, I bring it in DaVinci Resolve, I apply my color management, and I find that the shot is completely out of balance. The light coming from the practical wouldn't ever give off that much light, so it looks very sourcey without considering the fact that I don't really like the tone and the mood of the shot. Well, no wonder I had no control over it. All I knew was where my skin tones were at. So what to do instead? It really comes down to one single thing. Monitor your footage correctly and with consistency from shooting to grading. The first step you can take to get you closer to a proper preview would be to use the Gamma Display Assist, which is basically available on any Sony camera, and it gives you a neutral, clean Rec. 709 preview while shooting logs, so that you can judge exposure better, just like you would do if you were using a standard picture profile. But the best way to make sure that your lighting and exposure decisions will travel well from shooting to grading is to shoot while monitoring using the very same LUT that you're gonna use later for grading. This is very important because different LUTs with different level of contrast will effectively make you expose your image in different ways. If you see this image while shooting and you want to go for a moody type of scene, you might want to add negative fill to increase the contrast. But if you see this one instead, you would probably avoid negative fill and maybe even use fill light. And this is just because of a different rendering coming from two different levels of contrast of two different LUTs. This is what the great colorist Walter Volpato said when working with the DP Steve Yedlin on Star Wars The Last Jedi.
I had the pleasure to work on Star Wars The Last Jedi with Steve Yedlin and Ryan Johnson. It's amazing the level of knowledge that DP has. He spent a decade of his life to understand film, reproduction, color reproduction, and you name it, he knows it. So when he shoots, he has an intimate correlation between his camera and the lookup table to represent the final product, one-to-one. Yeah. So if you remember the movie, at one point Rey is thrown on the floor and she's looking at Snoke for the first time. And I say, Steve, what you want here? Point of red. Click. How's that? Good, do that for the whole scene.
You're kidding.
It's that easy. When you have amazing photography, it's that easy.
I know it might sound like it's not applicable to us, but the concept is really, really simple yet very powerful. Basically, what he's saying is that Mr. Yedlin, like many DOPs do, shoots on set with the very same LUT that the whole movie is gonna run through when brought into the grading room, normally referred to as the show LUT. That way, he can make lighting and exposure decisions that are gonna translate all the way from shooting to grading. And as the colorist Walter Volpato said, he basically didn't even have to grade at all. Point of red to the whole scene, and that was it. Previewing the image correctly will free you up immensely, because you don't have to worry about things like, where should I place this, where should I place that? What matters is your creative intent. And if we take skin tones, for example, they don't have to hit 50 IREs all the time. Skin tones, just like anything else in a scene, can fall pretty much wherever you want based on your creative intent. There's no such thing as proper exposure. If an image is underexposed and you want it that way, well, that's the correct exposure. On the other hand, if it's overexposed because you want the viewer to feel a certain way, well, that's also the correct exposure. Then when it comes to grading, since I try to do as much as I can in camera, I don't really do much. All I do is apply my Kodak 500T motion picture film stock power grade, which is loaded on the monitor as a LUT while shooting, and everything falls pretty much into place. Maybe adjust the white balance, color balance a bit, but that's pretty much it. If you're interested, you can check it out and find out more about my profiling process over at film-match.com. I'm not saying that measuring the brightness values of some of the elements in a scene has no purpose. I do use a light meter from time to time, and I find the newly introduced EL zone system very useful when you have to be precise with lighting ratios. Being precise with lighting ratios and measuring stuff can be really beneficial, but if there is one thing I would like you to take away from this video is the fact that there is no such thing as a correct exposure, but only the exposure that matches your creative intent. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, bye.